Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about School Spirit Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I've been screwing up on those intros a lot more recently, but I'm not going to go back and edit that. It's fine. Not that big of a deal. Either way, so we're immediately picking up in the aftermath of last episode, immediately get an answer to the questions. I was like, okay, so can he really see Maddie? Or is it just a coincidence? It's like, nope. He can straight up hear and see Maddie, which obviously Charlie was there being like, wait, how is that possible? But it turns out he can't see Charlie. He can only see Maddie, which that leads to like a long list of like, well, how is this possible? Charlie's thought was like, well, if there's someone that misses you, like, you know, enough and they're not ready to let you go, the fact is that they can see you. You know, you would also think, because that's also like the one thing where I'm like, yeah, it kind of feels like it's still, that's why I'm like, I can't remove Simon from he's going to be on my suspect list the entire episode. It's like, the entire show, because I'm like, I don't think you did it, but it's still like, there's certain actions he takes this episode that makes me, like, the fact is he's the only person that gets to feel like something happened. But to be fair, he would make the argument, right, I've known her longer than anybody else. Like, we're kind of a team. But to me, that's also where things could be wrong. Where it's like, right, this is the person that I'm closest to. But it turns out you really have feelings for her and she was completely unaware about it type of situation. I don't know. But once again, that's how some killers get away with stuff. They insert themselves in the investigation. So that's kind of the of it. So you don't know. So once again, Simon's staying on my suspect list, but for now we'll kind of treat him as both innocent and a suspect. So we'll see how that plays out. So because I get the feeling like he's probably going to stay on my suspect list for a while. But anyway, the fact is, it could be like hey, I just happened to miss you, but also maybe they have a connection because there is that deeper connection between them because they were best friends for so long, but also probably because like there's a connection created the moment you killed her type of thing, you know? Because I'm like, out of anyone, you happen to be the one that see her. Once again, maybe he has some latent spiritual powers, but if it was something like that, why can't he see any other spirit? I mean, maybe it's like it is a latent spirit thing, but it's only because of your connection to Maddie. Those were some of the wonderings I had last episode, but yeah, it is interesting that it's like, it's specifically her and no one else. So that he can't see, and apparently there's been no history of any other human, like, being able to do that. So that's what makes this situation so unique. I mean, they haven't really, at least at the ghost group, it doesn't seem like that's possible. It doesn't seem like it's ever happened before. Charlie's the one that was telling Maddie to keep it quiet because it's like, right, the last thing you want, it's like all of them knowing, and it's kind of he kind of made it almost seem like it was specifically don't let Dr. Martin know, which I'm like, I guess it's because Charlie kind of wants to monopolize it himself, because he was kind of making the argument, if you tell others, they'll try and monopolize it, because it's like, right, they'll ask you like a million things, like try to get Simon to do or say something, because it's like, right, at least even if they can't, because Simon's the only connection, so it's like, to be told is Simon could be the key to helping get everyone able to move on, give them some closure, because it's all about like, hey, finding closure, but it's like, no one's really found any closure. We find out from Charlie, one of the teachers that works at the school, his name is Emilio. He's someone that Charlie had a crush on back in high school. And it's been all these years later and still hasn't let that go. Apparently that was like his first crush. They probably never had their moment. But Charlie, when like Emilio was walking by, was like, I miss you. Then I'm like, the fact is all these years later still hasn't let that go. So that's why I'm like, yeah, none of them have ever fully let go. So maybe that's why they're all here, because they all do have unfinished business, because Maddie's the only one saying it, but everyone's feeling that. I think it's just how everyone's dealing with their own grief. They're all trying to bury it. Because I think like Rhonda, obviously she's the type of character that kind of buries like what she's feeling, and like kind of, because that was a whole conversation last episode about like, oh yeah, laughing at your pain. Obviously Kevin Hart made a whole comedy special about that, but it's like, yeah, she's kind of laughing about the fact that she was killed by her guidance counselor, because it's like, right, you kind of have to laugh at it, because it's better than like drowning in your sorrows, but it might only be like a psychological band-aid and psychological and emotional band-aid to kind of, it's your way of dealing with it, how you've processed it for all these years type of situation. So There's even this interesting moment later on in the episode where Claire ends up saving someone named Ava, and in that moment, like, all of them are watching, because I guess it's like it's hard to say if that's like a morbid curiosity thing where you're just like there on the other side being like, is she going to make it? Is she going to make it? And there was almost this look of just like, I guess it's like, right. Like, they're envious. I think it's that envy of like, yeah, you got a second chance. You were able to come back. There was like, you were on that borderline, and someone, borderlands, if you want to kind of, take a phrase from something else, but it's like, yeah, you were on that borderland between life and death, and it ended up dragging you back to life. So maybe it's that, because maybe they get like that around other people. Like, who knows how often? I mean, I'm sure it's often enough. Maybe not often enough, but there, like, this be in the area of that happening, of like, oh, being there on that cusp for some people. And it's like, oh, because I was curious, like, if she's in the middle of that right now, like, could she like temporarily pop over here and then pop back? But she never, like, no spirit ever popped up for her because she was in that in between. So, but she popped back onto the living side of things. So you're never on this side of things, on the ghost spectrum, until you fully die. So that, I mean, Charlie kind of talked about that last episode about, you know, when Maddie suggested, like, oh, maybe she's in a coma and a nurse stepped on like her ventilator or something like that. Well, now, you know, it's in that same regard. So, because the entire episode, Maddie's certain that it's like, right, she knows about Charlie. She knows about Claire and Xavier. So, but for her, she doesn't look at Claire as a suspect anymore. It's like, either they both murdered me or only Xavier did. But seeing that look in Claire's eyes when she saved Ava, it's like, that's not the eyes of a person. Like, you know, why would she go out of her way? Like, she's not capable of killing me if she's able to do that. But it's like, is that her trying to justify, like, regardless of what's going on between Xavier and her, she's trying to justify, like, if Claire's not that bad of a person, maybe I'm misjudging Xavier. Maybe he's not the one who killed me. Maybe he's not the bad person I think he is, because it is someone that you love. Despite them hurting you, the fact is you don't want to kind of admit, like, she doesn't want to see the worst in people, that's also a knock against Simon, because Simon wants to see the worst in people. He's like, you know, and, you know, maybe that's what kind of, that's their parallel. She kind of didn't want to see the worst in people, even though she kind of did, because she's kind of in that pessimistic lane too. But Simon really leans into the pessimistic lane, that like part of me wonders, is the mentality that Maddie had, just despite being like dead and everything, her mentality of like, oh yeah, people don't change or whatever, people won't surprise you because they'll always disappoint you. Is that just something created because of her circumstances? And is she only trying to be optimistic about Xavier because that's someone she loves? I mean, because she's not the same way about her mom, because she's like, yeah, my mom, like, what's she going to do without me? Like, who's going to be there to take away her car keys? She's always been there to kind of hold her mom together. Because it turns out the moment her dad died is when her mom fell apart. And she's had to deal with this. It ain't like a recent thing. Her mom falling apart has been a thing since she was... So I'm wondering, like, did she lose her dad at a very, very young age? Because she was like, yeah, there's this time at 5th grade when my mom... It was like this thing where my mom showed up, like, hammered or something like that. So I don't know if her dad's been going a very, very long time type of situation. But... I guess it's just, she's always had her ebb and flows. I'm guessing some good days are better than others, but there's probably not been a lot of like fully good days. They've just been better than yesterday type of situations, you know? But we haven't fully dived into that. But like I said, she was kind of pessimistic in that regard, but so optimistic when it comes to Xavier. But Simon himself is just purely pessimistic. And the fact is he's so aggro towards Xavier being like, I told you, like, why were you into that guy in the first place? It's like, yeah, but he didn't really care what anyone thought. I just thought he would, you know, what she thought was kind of hot. But then it's like, and then Simon said the line of, that's what I would use to describe you. And he happens to be the one that finds the pieces of the phone, which we'll get to in a second. But he happens to be the one to find that. That's where I'm like, there's some stuff lining up that I'm just like, it just adds more to Simon being in the suspicious column. Like, I think it's just interesting if your killer is the one who can see you and who's sending you on this, like, goose chase, because this way you keep together, because there is also this interesting thing, like it's not like Simon can see her and hear her all the time. Like sometimes she disappears, and even she's like wondering how long this is going to last. That's why she's trying to figure things out immediately, because who knows how long this connection between her and Simon will last, and he'll be able to see and hear her. Obviously he's got to be careful around this, because if he's not, he's going to look crazy because he's just talking to nothing. Nicole's already kind of worried about him. The whole incident in class where he's just like, oh, sweetheart, honey, like, no, now's not the time. I'm at work. I'm like, what are you doing, Simon? He's like, yes, please take my phone. And yes, I got to go to the bathroom. Can I go? Please? Yes, thank you. So did not handle that he's not the most well-adjusted person already, especially with all this weird stuff happening. So it's like, it's that complicated thing where like, hey, they're giving you levity moments for Simon. I'm like, it's always interesting when you give like the bad guy levity moments, when you find out later on it's like, oh, this person was a bad guy the entire time. So it's weird that you gave them levity moments, but I guess it's part of the disguise. Like I said, if and only if it turns out Simon's that guy. But like I said, I don't know, just Simon, just things just don't add up with Simon to me. Like, just, oh God, I almost feel like I'm putting him number one on my suspect list now. But it's like, I just don't, I don't want to overcommit, you know, that's why. So, but circling back to the phone conversation, it turns out, well, they checked Maddie's phone and they can't confirm or deny anything that Xavier said. I mean, because yes, he had Maddie's phone, and he says he could never figure out her password to get into her phone, so he was never able to delete it. So if that's the case, it added validity to his story. Problem is, the phone is wiped clean, because now they're wondering whether or not it actually is Maddie's phone. At least his father's asking that. So that's also sucky. Like, Xavier's got all of social media kind of claiming him to be this killer, especially, you know, it's like, especially at a young age. I think people do underestimate, like, oh, you're just like, oh, you can get away from social media. It's like, it's ingrained in so many people's lives, especially when you've grown up with it. It's easier when you're older. I mean, I think even older people who grew up without social media still struggle with that. But even if you, like, especially, but I think it's even worse if you grew up with social media, because it's something that connects everyone. That's how people stay connected to their friends, to the outside world. It's through social media. And I think some people underestimate, like you say, like, oh, you can unplug from that, but it's like unplugging a part of what is become not just a, yes, it'd be weird to say, like, some people are like, oh, it's weird to say it, essential part of life, but it is. That's how so many people, I mean, that's how most people get their news nowadays, is through social media. I mean, it's the internet, but still, like, it's all integrated. I mean, I'd even make the argument, there are people who go like, yeah, I get most of my news from Twitter. That's how that is. So I think people do underestimate. It's not that gonna be easy. Like, his dad being like, oh, just put your phone down, you might want to unplug. It's like, it's hard to kind of escape from, like, when it feels like the entire world is like jumping down your throat saying you're a killer, like making like video, like altering pictures to make you seem a certain way. Doesn't help when Claire is like calling him and texting him. It's just a reminder of, man, I did a sucky thing to someone I care about. And it just adds, and for him, it's like, if the whole him and Claire thing gets found out, it's just going to add more validity to what other people are thinking. Like, oh, they like, now we know why you did it. She must have found out about you and Claire, which obviously she never did. Because he knows she didn't, because if she had found out about the Claire situation the last time they talked, it would have come up. But it's like, nah, everything was still good between them, so he knows she never saw it. And that's what hurts even more. Like, if something happens to Maddie, she died not in his, I mean, she knows now, but in his mind, it's like, right, she died. The last time I saw her, I hurt her without her really knowing. She never knew how much I hurt her, so. But either way, before I continue that, I'll go ahead and finish my point and circle back around. I was about to say, like, that's actually something he ends up connecting with Maddie's mom about, because she's like, did you hurt my daughter? And it's like, not in that way that you think, but yeah, I lied to her, I hurt her. She's like, did you hurt her? And it's like, he's like, she didn't know, but yeah, I did. And she's like, I did too. She's like, a lot of times. And she's just like, and Maddie's mom is like, I just didn't think there would be one time she wouldn't come back home, and just, you know, and no one ever thinks about that this could be the last time you see or hear somebody. And sometimes we get so caught up in like our anger or just anything that we're dealing with. But yeah, especially because Maddie's mom was like, yeah, like Maddie's always been the one to tell me, like she'd always help me clean up, or she'd be the one to remind me of what I need to get rid of. Which even Xavier was like, yeah, I'm kind of like that too. I don't have a hard time throwing stuff away. So I mean, even Maddie, like whether she's serious or whether she was kind of somewhat joking, she did say that she liked Xavier because he's kind of broken a little bit. I mean, it might be a little bit of a thing of like Maddie saw the good in him beneath all that, but I don't know. But anyway, circling back to the phone point I was going to talk about was it. I don't think Xavier switched out the phones, but it does. There was like a 3-day period of him having that phone that someone could have. The fact of the matter is, the police had it in their custody, so I'd assume it'd have to be like. Well, because we know he said he tried to open it. Like, we don't know when he tried to open it, but he tried to open it, but he couldn't guess her passcode. So either in that 3 days he had someone snatch it, because he probably could have tried opening it immediately, most likely did when he took it from Maddie. But so that leaves like a 3-day window someone could have grabbed it. The obvious suspect could be his dad. I mean, his dad could have like found it and like took it at any point in time, because maybe he tracked Maddie's phone and ended up finding it in his son's possession, and then ended up because there are track my phone apps type of situations. So and with enough connections, he could, being a police officer, he could easily like switch that out, no problem. Any person could technically do that. Once again, it could be someone close enough like a Simon to do that. Once again, he's the one that keeps finding pieces to it, and I'm just like, it seems so suspicious, but we'll see. Obviously, they're leaning into the Mr. Anderson of it all, which even I was kind of wondering, like, they do seem like they're setting it up weirdly enough. And I'm like, I was kind of getting that vibe last episode. I was like, hey, because I said I recognized him from Travelers. He wasn't necessarily on my suspect list, but now, like, they're leaning into it. But I'm like, no. Once again, it's red herring after red herring, but you also know one of these red herrings is going to be true. It's just going to be disguised as a red herring. And you're like, oh, this was the truth the entire time to make you think it was a red herring, if that made any sense. So I feel like Mr. Anderson is, obviously he's on the suspect list, but I don't put him too high on the list. But like his whole, especially it was weird because when the dogs came sniffing on the school premises, he was like, oh yeah, it's probably Maddie's papers. The reason why I was like, the fact is they were smelling all over the desk, and he was like, yeah, it's probably because this paper was Maddie's, and he kind of latched onto it, like talking to Simon about, like, oh, Maddie, like her paper was so great. I was like, that's so weird, especially considering he had just said, like, yeah, I didn't even get to finish Maddie's paper. Which I love that, like Maddie's in the room when the teachers are talking about that, and Rhonda's bringing up the point. It's like, wow, enjoy it while it lasts, because she's like, yeah, it took my teachers a whole, 2 weeks before they started talking about Mardi Gras after my guidance counselor, killed me. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, yeah, she's like, yeah, they moved on pretty quickly. And that is kind of like that thing of like, yeah, it stays in the air for a while before it completely dissipates, and sadly people just kind of find a way to move on with their lives. The only ones who haven't are Simon and Nicole. Just Nicole's like, no, Maddie's just gonna pop up like nothing happened. So I'm not saying she's in denial, but she's in belief, like, no, it's all gonna work out, it's gonna be fine. Simon knows the truth. Yeah, everyone else is just kind of spinning their wheels trying to, like, no, like, what's going to happen? So, because Claire tried to go see Xavier and say, like, she was kind of implying, like, if you want to talk to anyone, talk to me. I don't think it was out of anything suspicious. I do believe it's just like, rely on me. I don't want you to put yourself in a position where you talk to someone else. Like, that's why I'm here for. We have this connection. Because I think she's like, we're in love, It was just only a matter of time before Maddie found out and we can be together. I think it's kind of what she's thinking, but it's like, who knows if that is how it was. Like, yeah, we were doing stuff behind Maddie's back, but I don't even know if he's fully sorted out his feelings about the whole thing. Like, would he have eventually left Maddie, or would he have left Claire to be with Maddie fully? Who knows? It's sadly kind of a moot point now, and I think that's also a little bit of that guilt of why he probably wants to keep his distance from Claire, because it's like, right, it wasn't fair to you, it wasn't fair to her, so... And I don't think he's, like I said, hasn't really figured everything out for himself, so... I am weirdly curious what the obituaries look like, because Mr. Martin was trying to get Maddie to write one, because apparently everyone else has too, and he had talked about the fact is it is kind of messed up that you are giving false hope. Like when you hold on to hope so tightly like that, you are kind of giving it to other people, but there's no point in having hope. There is no going back. There's no talking to anyone. But he does latch onto it later on when he's talking to Charlie. He's like, why is it that she was so talking about it like she was talking to her friend still? And Charlie's, oh, I've no idea, still being fresh and all that. He's like, right, but interesting. And it's like, has she remembered anything else? And once again, Charlie's keeping this to himself because I think he is trying to monopolize the situation, trying to stay close so he can. All the stuff that he was like, oh, don't tell the others because they might try to take advantage of it. I think he's trying to do the same thing, but who knows? Simon did give that piece to Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Gave him that piece of potentially Maddie's phone. He wasn't going to do that, but, Maddie convinced him to because it's like, right, Simon, if you give it to, like, the principal will give it to police, and then, like, Xavier's dad will potentially bury it, which was also his concern, too, so. But we don't know if Anderson actually did that or not. I mean, when the dogs were sniffing, he was trying to tell Simon not to focus on it, but then he was focusing on it, and you're like, maybe you have nothing to do with Maddie, but you might have some other secrets that might be buried at that school, quite literally, that you don't want anyone to find out about. So, like I said, not unless we find out like he was like the creepy teacher that was like super, super into Maddie and she was unaware. No one was aware that that's what was going on. Maybe, like I said, it just might also be he has his own demons and secrets that he's kind of worried about surfacing. I mean, that's what you get with these, like, whodunits. Everyone's got their secrets, and it's only a matter of time before they come bubbling to the surface about who knew what, when, and what they were keeping buried type of situation, Doesn't help with the Anderson thing that he shows up at the, when Simon was going to investigate more. And the fact is that he was even telling Maddie, he's like, oh yeah, check over there, like the hydraulic press, maybe that's what he used to break. He's throwing out too many theories that just like, right, that's good detective work, but it just feels like you're throwing out stuff because it's exactly what you did. So, but like Anderson showing up like, oh, you should leave it to the police and looking so sinister. And I'm like, yeah, it has to be a red herring. I don't know. Like I said, maybe about the Maddie thing, at least, like I was saying, he might have other secrets that he doesn't want discovered, but it might not be directly connected to Maddie. I mean, maybe it's tangentially connected to Maddie. Maybe it's connected to something else that overarchingly connects to the Maddie stuff. Well, ultimately, I have to wait to see. I'm curious to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode, which obviously I'll watch it immediately after this, so. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.